Well, welcome everybody. We'll let a few other people join on here. Looks like we've got a great group this week. John is, as far as I know, probably on the back of a motorcycle. He actually talked about trying to dial in from the back of his motorcycle as he drives back his new motorcycle. So we'll see how that goes. But everybody, welcome. I'm looking for who's got the great hat this week. I think, Paul, you've got the only really good hat. We've been having a theme there. I didn't do that. No pirate hat. Was it Mark? Were you the one wearing the pirate hat? Oh, he's gonna go get it. I see. So this week we got lots of stuff going on. Wow. So there's just so much. We wanted to talk a little bit about collaboration and kind of collaboration in how do we bring all the platforms together to start collaborating more on things that are good for all the platforms, and how can Open Assembly help? How do we take friction out of some of that process? And so that's kind of the theme we've got. But how's everybody doing? Pretty good. This is, we're coming up on like 3 months of doing this from your house. I see everyone's got the Zoom face on. No, it's all good.
I honestly, Steve, I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about going back to normal. It's kind of like people who've been prisoners for a long time get addicted to being in jail. So I anticipate that I will probably go somewhat crazy when we get back to whatever normal looks like again.
Yeah, I've almost resigned myself. This is my permanent thing. I've actually started engineering my backdrop a little so that it's more interesting. So, it's not just like looking out at my cupboards or something. So I challenge you all to find the really good, cool backdrop. And Dean, I have to say, you inspired me, to do something kind of cool.
It looks wonderful. Pleasing, very pleasing to look at that backdrop.
Yeah, before the call, I was telling the story of my cheetah skin back there. If we really get hardcore for content, I'll do my cheetah skin story. So let's see. So I kind of talked about the theme. We got some new folks on. Let's see. I think Rob Bierman, are you on? Looking for you here in the many panes. Rob was going to try to join from Catalent. He's the CEO there. Rob, are you on? We'll keep an eye out for Rob and see if he wants to check in. We just wanted to welcome him to this. I think you have to really experience it firsthand before you really become a hardcore follower of this group, right? Because they're definitely an interesting group. I will say we were going to have Chris Stanton on. He got pulled back out of this real quick to another meeting. But first, I guess what we probably want to do is start with our breakouts, right? Because that's been where we've been going to. I did ask Brandon to expand it to 3 people this week. So in case one person's kind of boring, you can actually find, or somebody you already know, you've got a better chance of a really great conversation. So we're going to take a little bit more time with 3 people. Remember that the prompt here is kind of the green, yellow, red. How are we doing? How is this going for you guys? Both industry-wide, sequestration-wise, and just how are the transitions going? How's the industry going? And really try to get you to meet some new people and connect in ways you might not be able to. So, Brandon, are we in a pretty good place for that right now?
We are. We're looking good. So we're going to let this run for about 6-7 minutes. I'll start closing the rooms. That gives you another minute before the rooms will shut down, and you'll be back at the mothership. So hold tight and get ready for launch.
Fantastic. Thanks.
So I got a couple ideas or things to share, Steve. So going off of the topic of how we collaborate more as an ecosystem, more successfully as an ecosystem, which I think really becomes like a go-to-market strategy in some ways, an execution strategy. Some of the things we're seeing that are being successful are we're being asked by our enterprise customers more often for stuff outside of just what Topcoder does. So the market is coming to us saying, hey, well, what about as an example, penetration testing as an example. We do QA on Top Coder, but we don't do pen testing. So it's not a part of our QA portfolio. So our ability to go to, we would call them like, you know, cousins, people who operate a similar mindset but do something very specific and bring them in, is giving us more of a position of strength and the ability to have, like, I would say, rapid conversations with those other partners and willingness to say, hey, we want to try this. Are you willing? And being able to cut through sometimes things contractually rather quickly, but to then kind of, I don't want to call it Frankensteining, that's a little too crude, but Frankensteining something together, putting a good facade on it for a customer so they have one way to absorb it and go to market with maybe a couple of pieces appended to each other. We're seeing more opportunity to do that, and we're seeing more people asking for stuff that's outside of just what we do. And we're pretty wide in terms of what we do for technology, and still we're being tapped. So I would only imagine that others on the call who maybe focus on things like content or whatever it is that you focus on, I wonder if the other opportunities are there as well. Last week in one of the breakouts, geez, I have to go back to my notes. I apologize. But the gentleman who operates the call centers, if they're on, he was saying they're getting lots of conversations for desire for software dev, because they know they do those things. Like, oh, we're also getting hit up for engineers. And so I just wonder if that's kind of the norm, if people are seeing that as well. And if there are other stories out there for folks to say, yeah, I was able to tap this other crowd partner, bring them in and successfully go to market with them.
Yeah, it's interesting because when this topic came up, Top Coder, Clinton, was one of the first things I thought of, because on our contract, we've actually done several efforts where HeroX and Top Coder partnered together to actually do kind of a sequence of ideation, problem solving, and implementation. It kind of showed us, hey, these communities can start to work together to kind of chain together. And Diane, I know you've have experience in that, and in biology, you've done stuff like that. So I think we'll want to talk through some of that. I wanted to throw over Jen to you real quick, just to see kind of where you guys are on some of this collaborations from the academic standpoint. Where are you seeing the big opportunities for collaboration, for breaking down the kind of pain points and the friction of making that happen?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. There's just a lot of interest, I think, in people wanting to discover new ways of doing things without sort of how to do it. So we've just heard that a lot of people are just experimenting, just going ahead and doing it, and sort of the asking for forgiveness rather than permission. And that strategy seems to be working well with a lot of companies. I don't think it will long term. So I think the way that folks in this community are really shaping themselves and positioning themselves, especially the platforms. It's interesting what Clinton's saying there about the sort of the demand coming to you. I think eventually that'll shape the way our platforms are evolving. And I think we'll be forced to move a bit quicker as well. But a lot of companies are just trying to figure out different ways to do things so that you're not just stuck going back to the other way, right? So the components of this, again, are remote work. I have the employees. How do I figure out how to get better, production out of my teams, increase value, change the way we're doing work? And then we don't have the talent at all. And how do I find it? How do I find that person? Again, that's not quote unquote in the building, and no one's in the building anymore. So, but teams are accelerating for sure. Talked to a few companies of late that are thinking about this, and especially with this is some of the other stuff that we do, again, in terms of digital transformation, but the digital tools that are coming out of this crisis that we've hit are going to be fascinating in terms of how we get things done and simplified and engaged. And it's largely going to influence policy as well, right? So this is still the time where like the action happens, the experiments happen, and then the policies influence. And that is, I don't think that's going to be clear for a little while. So it's a good time for us to, again, continue to talk about these things, have conversations. Lots of people are publishing, especially in this group as well. So I'd encourage you to keep doing that, because I think it'll it'll shape. And then the big dominoes will fall. We know that, the way Facebook thinks about getting work done, or where they're going to have their employees, that's going to shift. And so I'm less concerned about that, and more just, again, as people are experimenting, not talking about them and what they are. So I think that's important to keep doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Last week, I saw a comment in the chat from Mike Morris, who I think a week or two ago, he said, really this is about network effects at this point, and how can we build the network effects of different companies that are having good experiences using open talent, using open innovation. And I think that's where, if we think of it that way, turning on different industries to multiple options here, where you might not be able to give them a good fit for just everything, but being able to kind of hand them off to another community, another open talent piece, and opening that network piece up might be a really important piece. Hey, Simon Hill, I think you're on, right?
I'm on.
I think you actually started this topic when you were talking to Brandon in your interview, and kind of got us going on this. Talk to us. By the way,
Yeah,
Simon is Wazoku, so CEO of Wazoku. So go ahead, Simon.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I think I did start this topic, so apologies, everybody. I was coming at it from, so I actually really like the example you gave earlier, Steve, of I think it was Hero X and Top Coder, but if I got this brands wrong, apologies. That collaborated together through the kind of ideation and delivery side, and I think I'd love to see more of that, and I'd be very open for those types of relationships from a Wazoku perspective with any of the sort of delivery side or talent side people as well, if they're interested. Part of my conversation with Brandon though was we were talking about the community, right? And I was like, I think it's a highly valuable community, but my concern is that we exist a little bit in an echo chamber, because we all drink the Kool-Aid already, right? And we all know how much potential and untapped potential is there in the work that we do, and we're trying to change minds and behaviors and ways of working for the mass market and for more adoption. And some of my fear is that we are, there isn't a Microsoft or a Salesforce or an Oracle or someone else in this space to kind of do the mass marketing and create the marketing sector. And if we spend all of our time competing with each other, whatever space that's in, right, then we're deploying marketing dollar to fight for the same landscape or that little bit of inched expansion. And that there may be better ways that actually, if the market were bigger and we work together to make this marketplace bigger, deploying our marketing dollar collectively, that we can bring more evangelists and more followers with it, and actually we'd all benefit off the back of that, right? It's very idealistic, because I get the way that business works, but I think that we all preach co-creation and collaboration and openness, but as a competitive sector, don't necessarily live and breathe it. And I've tried really hard to be that business that can do it, and we don't live it perfectly. We still keyword compete with our competitors. We still do other things that we might want to do, but I do pass leads across to other businesses, and I think we're not the right one to do it. And so it was more of a rallying cry, right? Is that I think we're fishing in a pond that's still a little bit, it's still tiny, and you get it, and you work at a great organization, and that's good, but there aren't one of you or many of you in every organization. The innovation teams in businesses tend to be tiny compared to the comparable importance of how they are and relative to other teams in businesses. And so we don't win until there's real evangelists across all of the businesses, and that's going to take a lot of combined effort. So that was my theory, right? That was my call, right? How can we do more together?
I love that. And if you think about it, if everyone's experience when they try to engage a platform for open talent is different and requires different kind of processes and different information and different steps, that just kind of brings things to its knees as well. So it's kind of interesting to kind of have this aggregate here and to talk about, hey, are there opportunities where we can start to make the engagement of open talent have a similar look and feel while still maintaining, competitive features. I think nobody thinks that should go away, but are there ways that as we bring, all ships will rise? So that's awesome. Thank you. Jeff, Senator, I think that's how I'm saying your name, from Upwork. I got to talk to you in the breakout. What's going on with Upwork? Like, how are you guys seeing kind of all of this, and kind of where do you weigh in on this this collaboration, and how should platforms be working together, or kind of navigating all of this, and what can we do to help as OA, right?
Yeah, well, glad to be here again. My name is Jeff from Upwork. And yeah, I think that what we're seeing is actually our chief economist just put out a study yesterday where it showed that 90% of people who think that remote work is going better than they expected. So I think that's kind of the new normal that we're going to get into, is companies who didn't think that this was possible understand that it works. And it's kind of advanced or pushed our timeline forward a decade or more of what we're all trying to accomplish. So that's one thing for sure. And then when it comes to this idea of how these platforms can work together, I think it's an idea of co-opetition, and that's basically like we can work together as competitors, but try to make something that is an environment that benefits us all. Because no one, I forget who was mentioning it, maybe it was Simon, but I was thinking the same thing you were, that none of us is Amazon. Like, Amazon doesn't want to go compete or cooperate with any other e-marketplace, because they're so big. They have such a big percentage, and no platform that has talent is so big that that's, not something that we want to do. So I think in terms of collaborating and cooperating, we're always, I think, more now than ever trying to simplify our platform and our offering, because we see that so many people are coming to the platform now. It's incredible. Just the waves of clients and freelancers coming to Upwork to either get work done or find work. So we need to make it simpler now more than ever, because there are people who aren't the early adopters. They're the later wave, and they don't have the time or energy to figure it out, or, sift through this post or that, landing page, or, any detailed process. They just need to get it done. Yeah. So I think now more than ever, we really need to simplify. We really need to work together so that we can shape that new normal. I think somebody in the comments said at the very beginning, we have once in a lifetime opportunity to shape our new normal. And I think as the leaders in the space, if we can all work together to do that, I think that's a really great opportunity. So that's kind of where I stand. I don't know if I want to speak for Upwork, but I believe I could. I know that our leadership is always about how can we work together? How can we, make people's lives better through the service that we offer? And so if we can do that together, I think that'd be great.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Let's see, Wyatt Nordstrom, I think you're on from Maven. Where are you on all this?
I think that we're experiencing all of the same things that the rest of you are experiencing and commenting on. Big increases in utilization, but also, folks, expressing satisfaction with the new status quo, which is pretty unusual. I think one of the lone exceptions to that would be my wife, who's sitting in the next room, who absolutely can't stand working from home. But so she's maybe among the 9% out of the 91%, or of the versus the 91% who favor this. But that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it's interesting because, whenever we talk about this, I think sometimes my urge is always to talk about how this is taking over the world and how all of this is going to be the new norm. And I always have to stop myself and think, no, it's a rebalancing, right? There are still going to be in-person places where that makes sense. There's still going to be freelancers that you have deep relationships with, in addition to the ones that you have glancing blows with. There's still kind of be this mix, but it's a big reshuffling, right? It's a big change that we're undergoing of both remote work as well as kind of open talent. Let's see. Brian Pena, I haven't heard from you today. I think you had some interesting comments kind of last time about kind of where things like standards in certification and training might actually be some helpful things. But where are you on some of this?
Well, I think that the first step is to kind of minimize the amount of balkanization that happens in the platform economy right now, right? There are so many confusing different modes of engagement, ways to engage people. I think harmonizing on some acknowledged best practices and even just simply operating principles as a starting point is really I think something that needs to be done. So many people who are on the demand side of the equation don't understand the multitude of platforms that are high profile and where they would fit into a strategy. So we are all forced as an industry to pursue one-off opportunities with hiring managers at the point of need. That's a tactical point solution as opposed to being a really strategic resource. So it takes a lot of market narrative around building a set of operational standards and sort of rules of engagement on how you would engage and implement a platform solution. I think that is one of the area of greatest need is we should take this time, my favorite word, the zeitgeist of the time, and be able to really evangelize kind of a set of talking points about the value proposition of this new way of working that is a unified narrative across everybody. Everybody has a very different way of saying things. Dean has a different way of saying things. John has a different way of saying things that suits their unique worldview and perspective. But if we can arrive at a certain set of consistent talking points about the benefit for the organization, the individual, and society as a whole, I think that, and if we can have that sort of talking thread throughout all of our major market messaging, then it becomes part of the common knowledge, right? And that's the goal. You know, there's a great metaphor about how societies build tribal knowledge, and I wish it is escaping me right now. And it was from a Jonathan Haidt book. I love Jonathan Haidt stuff.
Yeah, right.
But he talks about the behaviors that are necessary to create a collective understanding of something. Like we all know collectively, you know, how to act when we get into an elevator. No one taught us how to do that. We just kind of learned it from interactions with elevators. And that sort of tribal herd understanding is something we need to strive for in this way of engaging, because there is so much counter narrative and so much ossified processes and procedures and organizations that that are much more inclined towards keeping the status quo in place.
No, that's great. Yeah, all of this is just really kind of emergent in some ways, and then we're trying to push it in other words. It's kind of fascinating to watch those two things work together. So when I think about stringing these different services together, you know, Balaji, what you've done at Deloitte and what Diane you did at GE, you guys were doing this before anybody else in terms of kind of stringing open platforms together to get a service. You guys want to chat a little bit? Because Balaji, I know you've kind of pushed this to be a whole kind of enterprise offering, if you will.
I mean, the problem of having a haircut is you can't see the gray hair that happened as a result of it. But I'd go back to what Brian said. I totally agree with you that I don't actually think that the messages are very different from the marketplaces. They're kind of the same. But it's because there are so many of those little, I wouldn't say little, but there are so many of these companies that are trying to compete for market share. You typically, it seems like it's more of the problem that, you know, if you combine all of the work across all of the marketplaces within an enterprise, there'd be a decent amount of work. It's just that the network effect doesn't exist because nobody knows that. There's no knowledge of that. And also what you also don't know is an individual freelancer, how many platforms have they worked on? Again, to be able to show a network effect that an Upwork should be able to sell a freelancer saying this person participated on TopTal and he or she has done this much amount of work. Because of the siloed relationships within companies and because of the siloed experience of the freelancer, you don't really know how big you literally are, even though it's not huge, but whatever little scale exists is distributed. So I think and given companies like MBO, which kind of sit as infrastructure across all of these companies, I feel have a bigger responsibility in a way to organize that disparate capacity and disparate supply in a way that, because that's becoming, in many ways, they should take on a role like what Salesforce took on, where it kind of drives interoperability across different types of tools and techniques, because that's what is missing. There's no common infrastructure for the freelance marketplaces. Every company has its own infrastructure, and that's a big challenge, and that is the reason why Diane and I created what we did. But that is not scalable. That needs a significant investment from a company to say we need a team to manage all of this fractured ecosystem, and many companies are like, it's not ready for us, and that's a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Diane, talk a little bit about where Balaji and the gray hair is coming. I'm not going to say you have gray hair, but Balaji's gray hair. Where's Balaji's gray hair coming from?
Yeah, Balaji's gray hair is well earned. It's he nailed it, right? So I think the marketplace industry has really, I think, solved well for kind of the education process, the awareness. We've seen tremendous improvement and progress in the service offering, the sophistication of the models, the messaging, and the problem or the opportunity, I should say, on the adoption and maturation of the industry is more on the demand side right now, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
That the work that I did at GE, to Balaji's point, I was creating an analog operation at GE so that we could leverage marketplaces and the experts within their communities at scale. And to do that, you have to patch together a lot of workflows. Right now, there is no intelligent system that, if you think about the speed of workflows and solution delivery that marketplaces are generating, it's kind of the work equivalent to the Audubon, right? And the speed of marketplace delivery for capacity and solutions is exceptional. The efficiency is exceptional. And when you try to insert that into an enterprise workflow, it's like driving into kind of a local community road system, right? 25 miles per hour, right? So there is no intelligent and efficient system within large enterprise right now that allows you to connect into marketplaces for capacity and solutions. And so there's this friction.
Kind of an impedance mismatch.
Exactly. So you're trying to leverage a lot of different marketplaces for a lot of different skills and outcomes. And there's this huge switching cost, right, at an enterprise level. So right now, the marketplaces are feeling that inefficiency. So
yeah. One last thing I'd say, I think the infrastructure ideally has to be connected in some way to where aggregation of demand happens within companies, right? Which is at the recruitment level. There should be a system that actually should ideally be able to say, the moment you post a job rec or somebody says, I need a resource, there should be a triage system that says, it's going to take, that it's going to take 2 or 3 months to hire. These are the 5 candidates that are available as freelancers to fill that gap, so that they don't have to make the huge leap that I'm using a freelancer in perpetuity, but it's solving a real problem today. But without that, we're expecting individual users to convert at an individual level. There is no enterprise system integration that automatically points out demand. And I think that is an absolute critical infrastructure, again, going back to Brian's point, that should exist and must exist. And without that, we'd always be in a piecemeal mode.
Right.
That's awesome. So it's really interesting, because the more we talk about this, the more I see a need for us to really be engaging HR departments and procurement departments in kind of this entire conversation, because we are re-engineering the way HR and procurement happen, right? So Gavin McClafferty, you've kind of been on the demand side of this, right? You've reached into the crowd and several crowds trying to get work done. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what was hard, what made it easier in some than others?
Yeah, definitely. So it's not really difficult to develop an ecosystem and connect to unimaginable levels of talent or to acquire almost any solution, inevitably the biggest difficulty is actually sits within your own organization. So what's your capacity in the first place to even go outside? What's the culture like in your organization that allows you to break down that barrier and move forward? The second thing that often a lot of organizations don't really understand is what's the value proposition around what you're actually trying to solve or what you're trying to acquire. So not enough people really ask that question when things get going. Once you find a solution or you get access to that talent, you know, that's not that difficult. But the next part is, how do you keep that momentum? So how do you say, okay, I've acquired this, I can no longer afford to stand still. The fire needs to keep burning, the wheels need to keep moving. That's inevitably some of the challenges that come up. And I think for me, it's about being able to show very quickly and very effectively what the actual value proposition is. So what is the challenge you're trying to solve? What are the key insights into that? How can you move forward? How can that crush the timeline that your organization could traditionally deliver that within?
Gotcha. So it's interesting because we've got this kind of dual problem here. One is, do companies understand the need? Are they really catching on that there's a need that really almost uniquely open talent can provide, that responsiveness to changing resource needs that happen faster than you can actually do traditional hiring and staffing, right? And then the other part of that is the deployment and actually using it. So one is there enough understanding of the problem, followed by, okay, once I understand I have this problem, do I even know that these resources are out there? And then follow on from that, am I going to hit a lot of big speed bumps trying to actually utilize them?
Yeah, so I had quite an interesting problem around a piece of subsea architecture that my organization was looking to optimize, and they had a degree of interest in this, so it was an issue that they'd been aware of for some time, and there was a desire to optimize this piece of architecture, which was performing incredibly well, but they recognized that they could make some improvements, and that would allow them to reduce down the scale of the architecture that existed. And essentially, we took a problem that had existed for 30 years, solved it in 12 weeks. A $100 million project became viable as a result of that, with a 3,333% return on investment. So, you know, that's the level of what's possible. But what's also interesting is that within that particular challenge, someone had came forward and said, I'm going to get a team of our internal engineers on this, probably take somewhere between 12 to 24 months and millions of dollars. And we solved it for a small percentage of that. Yeah. And we're able to rapidly move forward.
Yeah, it's remarkable, the capacity of this stuff, but it's also like just, it's almost like the too good to be true stories almost scare people off and think, well, I can't, that's not really true, right? But we see it over and over that there's these massive gains. So that's great. Let's see. Jeff Carbeck from 10X, are you on? Jeff Carbeck? Looking for his mute button.
Yep, I'm here. I'm here. I have a bad connection, I think.
No, it's all good. You want to weigh in a little?
Yeah, you know, I think it's you know, we're facing a challenge where, you know, what we're trying to do, and maybe it's another way to think about the conversation, is how do you differentiate what we do from other offerings that are the traditional ones, right? So not amongst other sort of crowd-based or gig economy-based platforms and capabilities, but, you know, for people who are used to gaining access to outside insights, but through a traditional challenge, say a traditional consulting firm, how do we both say we can do many of those things, and yet at the same time say we're fundamentally different both in the talent that we access and in the way that we deliver? And I think it's this kind of point of differentiation that we need to think about as a community, right? So what are we displacing? What are we disrupting? And how is this collectively a better way to go as opposed to just individually, right? So at 10X, I can make an argument, having been at Deloitte with Balaji, and now 10X, I can describe how some of the things that we do at 10X are different than the things that I did at Deloitte, and they bring different kinds of value in different ways. But how do we think about that as a broader message? That's kind of one question I have. And then the second point around procurement, I think, is spot on. In fact, one of the things we were able to do is establish a preferred partnership with BASF, a large chemicals company based in Germany, specifically because we finally got procurement to recognize the value of our kind of way of working, and procurement saying there's value in this beyond the value that our business unit leaders see. And we actually want to put in a preferred provider agreement with you so that we can encourage our business units to use you guys because you're much more cost efficient because of the way you work and the way you leverage freelance talent and capabilities. So, I strongly agree that that's procurement is the less obvious one. I think HR is really the exciting one, but I think those are both, and the message has to be sort of shared amongst those two. So those are my two thoughts on
that's a really great point that I haven't heard enough people talk about, is that for a lot of folks, a lot of companies, they almost see open talent as just a variant of, or, well, yeah, I can get that through consultants and I'm going to go straight to consultants. And there is a difference, in that differentiation is important. Did somebody want to jump in? Sorry, I thought I heard somebody.
I think I want to make a point real quick, because we studied this market quite a bit. I think that, statistically speaking, almost 85% of companies surveyed, at least procurement managers and HR folks, are aware of the human cloud platforms. This is when I was at SIA, we studied this market quite extensively. So, but the delta between considering doing it and actually doing it are pretty vast. Like, for example, talent pools, 22% of the surveys were engaging in talent pools, but 65% of them wanted to implement one. So that shows the tremendous gap between the knowledge of the platform and the actual time to execute and where it fits into an overall strategy. So I think, I was a procurement guy for 12 years and I've advised them for another 10. So I've been in this business for 20 something years. I started when I was 13, by the way. But I think that it's not the lack of understanding about the value in the platform. It's the understanding about where it fits into a strategy and how it becomes a strategic resource. Because, Dean talks to as many people as I do. And I think he can probably acknowledge, as does John and Paul. And it's not that buyers and people in procurement are not interested in these things. It's often facilitating adoption in the end client internally is more of a challenge. And that's the big thing. The number one advisory strategy that I use, and it's always been successful both for myself when I was in procurement and also when I'm talking to procurement people, is you need to foster and hammer in on one topic and one topic only. It's not cost savings, it's adoption. It's program adoption. Because I've done probably in my procurement career several hundred RFPs, and I guarantee you the number one success criteria was the level of adoption in the organization. How many people are using the program the way that I intended it to be used and the way that the contract agreed upon in both parties? And there was such a execution gap between what we promised and what's being delivered in terms of adoption organizational value, that if we can find a way to articulate a message that really hits home on enterprise-wide adoption, that's the successful metric. I don't care who you are and what you're selling. The number one goal is not cost savings, it's adoption.
Yeah, thanks. David Swift, did you want to jump in?
I did, yeah. So procurement professional with Novartis, 10 years. I started when I was 12 and I've got 25 years procurement experience, so makes me 37, I think. I agree with what Brian said. So I've done MSPs, talent communities, we signed TopTal up into Novartis, etc. And we're very open to all of these ideas and platforms, and like to think that we're slightly ahead of some others. However, the biggest challenge is indeed that it's how do I get my business partners to actually start to use the channels that we have gone to the effort to put in place. So an example, I had a conversation with IT. He said, oh, we just go to Accenture when we need some bodies. And I said, well, you know what they do? They have a talent pool of people, and then they charge a big fat Accenture margin on top. And I said, well, we can do the same thing without the big fat Accenture margin. But getting them to understand it is pretty straightforward, but getting them to change behavior and actually say, you know, let's not go to Accenture anymore. Let's do this ourselves, working with our procurement partners, and they can do it just as well. That's the challenge. So Brian is exactly right what he said there.
Yeah, we see the same thing with our large kind of standing army contracts with Boeing, Lockheed, and the rest. There's just this ease of going to the same old folks over and over, and we're actually trying to get them to change their models to where they're starting to use this, so that we get the inherent effects without having to change everyone's procurement. Okay,
but Steve, the only thing I said, yes, you should also go to top talent, come to Deloitte and Accenture for other things. We're here.
True. Yeah, yeah. You have to say that, but no, everyone's got a role here, right? It's totally true. Let's see, John Healy, can you kind of wrap this up for us? Because you guys at Kelly OCG, like you literally are trying to attack this kind of problem, like with this new offering. You want to just talk about kind of what took you there and how that's working?
Yeah, I think what comes out of it, and I was going to chime in on the chat as Balaji referenced that, it's fit for purpose. Yeah. And earlier there was so much conversation about how everyone's got their individual little slice, but there's so much overlap between where each of us fall that there's a possessiveness of trying to capture as much market share as you can. Mm-hmm. And there are times that certain partners, if I'm going to the boardroom, I like having McKinsey or BCG's logo going in there. But if I'm trying to help one of the business unit leaders inside our organization do strategic planning, then I am happy to go out to a platform and get the talent that I need to execute that. If I'm trying to go and get some developers to execute a very specific, I'm going to go and use it for that reason. If I want a longer term project and I need to organize something in a statement of work, I actually want a common methodology amongst the different people who are doing it. So if I'm going to a platform and buying people individually and getting no consistency amongst them, then I've got a weakness in that. So I think everyone wants to be able to hit on how they're solving their wing of the problem. This is a much bigger problem for the marketplace. We can't look down and identify talent and say who can do what, because we've all chosen our own words, and it's broader than lexicon. It's the standards, it's the competencies, knowledge, skills, abilities, if you want to go into it in the way that at least the US government does it. But then if you go to the NUTS 1, 2, 3 system in the UK, you're going to get a whole nother. But if we can come up with a common vernacular, the opportunity is that you take friction out of the process of speed to outcome and results for a company and speed to a paycheck for a worker. So what the offering that you're referencing that we've put into the market, and Dean's been a part of it, it's not to try to push everything together. It's fundamentally to act as a decision tree, because the enterprise buyer doesn't know where to go. They feel like they need to tick a box and say, I've done gig. And so they end up sending Upwork a job for a corporate strategist. It's probably not the sweet spot for them. Or they send TopTal something for a shift worker in hospitality. Definitely not where they're going to go. So there is a degree of ignorance inside the large enterprise, and such a fragmented market where we have so many people who do so many things in these micro communities that are forming that generate really unique value. Trying to keep track of all of that is hard. And that's where, I do believe this collective has a unique opportunity to think of ways, not under any of our individual brands, but under the Open Assembly brand, to look at how do we bring these parts together.
Right.
For the good of the whole, as opposed to the good of each of us individually. Because if you grow the market as a whole, we can all fight for our own share of the pie. And the antitrust people will make sure that we don't step on each other that way. But I just think that that's a big opportunity that is missing. And I go back to a comment I've made on previous calls or going through it. When we all come in and speak a different language to a customer, we demonstrate that it's an immature market, and a lot of customers out of that turn and say, well, then I'm just going to pause and wait until these guys get their act together.
Plus one to that.
Yeah.
Steve, could I jump in, Steve? Hey, Steve?
Yep.
Sorry, just exactly on that, John. What one suggestion then I'd make is I know my platform from a technology point of view really, really well. I know what all the buttons do. I know which buttons don't work very well, all that stuff. I don't know how Top Towels works or Upwork. I haven't had a sneaky look. If we're going to get similar vernacular going and use similar terminology, surely we should have some sort of open sessions where we basically take our pants down and say, hey guys, this is what mine does. The next time you're talking to an end customer, be nice about mine, I'll be nice about yours, but we can begin to pull some of that terminology, some of that workflow into a similar way without treading on each other's toes, without sharing state secrets or any of that, but just pulling it a little bit closer.
Yeah.
That was
That was great. Thank you, Andy. So let's see, I had one more person I wanted. I know we're almost out of time here, but Kristen Hamburger, I had you on my list. Where are you? Are you still on?
And Steve, how are you? It's funny. Kristen's not here today.
Oh.
Yeah, it's me.
Well, I like
yeah,
you too. So
no, she's not there, but she will join for sure next week.
Okay. Did you have any last minute comments? I like Fanny. She's awesome.
No, I think I just love those calls, and I love like all the perspectives that you're all bringing, and yeah, it's always like super nurturing. So that's it. It's always like the breather of fresh air every week. So thanks.
Well, thanks. I think this has been a great conversation. I still feel like this is the start of the conversation. There's a lot of specifics that we need to get into in terms of pulling this into real specifics in real things that are tangible, that OA can kind of facilitate us working in terms of standard ways of language, like Andy brought up, in standard kind of interactions and processes. You guys have been great. I've got 1 minute here. I had asked Gavin if he would kind of monitor the chat, because the chat is actually half of this meeting, right? I recognize that. I'm just here to kind of like look pretty. But the real stuff is in the chat. Gavin, did you have anything that would just the one point that really came out more than anything? And we'll try to send out the rest to everybody.
Yeah, I think Shilpa nailed it at the start. So Shilpa from Deloitte posted a comment around what will the new normal be, and how can we influence that? How can we build something that's going to be better than before and not go back to how things were? So that really resonated with me. I think that some of the things that have been shared, throughout the conversation as well, is some great takeaways there in terms of how do you build support within your organizations? How do you get your supply chain and procurement on board? Absolutely key. If you can do that, you're laughing and get leadership.
Thank you for doing that, Gavin. I appreciate it. And we're at time, guys. So I really appreciate everything. Next week, I think, Balaji, you might be in the hot seat next week. Hopefully, John will be back with some great footage of his adventure. And if you know John, there is an adventure going on right now. Hopefully, we'll get some good footage of. Balaji, you got any preview for us?
Absolutely not. I'm not going to wear that stiff blue shirt and then do what you did. I will do it very differently and then
wow.
And then fail miserably.
So you have awesomeness to
better
look
wear
forward
a hat.
Yeah.
Now his hair's growing back nicely. It's growing back nicely. I'm pretty sure there'll be a shoe analogy next week, but that's a whole nother thing. Hey guys, thanks for joining. Again, reach out to each other, connect with each other. This is a valuable set of folks, and you're really amazing. I'm humbled to be given the opportunity to kind of facilitate this, but I have actually gotten to meet with a number of you, and you just blow my hair back. It's really great. So I appreciate you guys being on, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Steve.